All right, class. So in this video, we're going to be adding a variable to our game so that it keeps count of the number of fish that we eat. A variable is a term you'll hear very often in computer programming. And to try to simplify its definition, computers don't remember things unless they're told to remember things. So anytime we want a value saved, like our score, we have to tell the computer where we want it saved, and we have to give it a name so that we can refer to it later. So in this case, we're going to create a variable called score. Now, the score variable is not the number of points. The score variable is the location in the code where the points are added, where the points are kept. So let's go ahead and get started. So at this point, we have our game, our title sequence works, so we can go to how to play, even though I see a typo there. And we can click on start and our game begins. Our shark smoothly glides up to the top, and our fish are coming by one at a time and changing the appearance of the fish so there appears to be more of them. All right, so let's start adding our variable to count the fish. To do this, we're going to go to these orange buttons down here, and we're going to click on Variables. You will notice that there's already one called My Variable, but we don't want that. So click on the white box at the top that says Make a Variable. We're going to name it Score. And then we have to choose, do we want it for all sprites, or do we want it just for this one sprite? And as you go farther in coding, you can learn the difference between these, but to simplify it at this point in your learning, I would always choose for all sprites. Let's click OK. And now you see at the top of our screen, we have a place that holds our score, and it has a name called score. This is our variable. We can also see over on the left that there's a checkbox, and we can make it appear, and we can make it disappear. Now, even when it's disappeared, it's still there. The variable's still there in our code. It's still keeping that score. We just don't see it in the game. And we can also change its appearance in the game by double-clicking on it. So when I double-click the first time, it will take me to just the number. Double-click again, it gives me a slider where I can change the value in the code. And double-click back, and it gives me the name of the variable and the value. So now that we have the variable, we have to tell the computer program what we want that variable to do. And in our case, we want to say when the shark sprite touches the fish sprite, we want the variable to increase by 1. So let's go into our fish code and let's find the location where if the shark is touching, it makes a bite sound. So here in our code, we have, starting at the beginning of the game, at the game background, forever, if the shark is touching this sprite, which is the fish, if the shark is touching this sprite, we want the fish to hide, and we want it to play the bite sound. We also want the variable to go up by 1. So we're going to drag this block here that says change the variable by 1, and we're going to put it in between the hide and the play sound. And the reason we're going to put it here is I want that number to change first, so it's like an instant switch. Click, then play the bite sound. All right, so let's go ahead and play our game now, and let's see what happens. So why is our variable not increasing? Well, in this case, we didn't name our variable. So remember, we had to give it a name to refer to it. So let's change the name to score. So now we are referring to this specific variable, and let's run our code. And at that point, you see we are getting 1 point for each fish. Now, sometimes what will happen is your points will just increase rapidly. So when you touch the fish, you're getting 1,000 or 10,000 points. And what happens there is that there's nothing behind the variable. So it just says change the score by 1. And what you need to do is you need to put a wait block so that it only counts 1. And then waits a second for the fish, even though it's hidden, to finish sliding behind the shark. So if your variable it just starts massively counting numbers, put a wait block after the variable. All right, so now we've got a working code. Our variables are being counted one at a time, but we're going to run into a new problem. So when I click the green flag now, notice my variables are still there. My score is still there. Excuse me, not my variables. My value inside of the variable is still there. And we don't want that. I want it to reset to 0 every time we start the game. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add what's called an initiation. I'm going to tell the variable where to start, and I'm going to put that right at the beginning of the game. At the beginning of the game, I want my variable to set to 0. And when I say the beginning of the game, I mean after the title screen. So now when I click start, let's set. Okay, that's the issue. I forgot to change the variable to score. Let's try this again. Now when I click start, my score resets to 0. And then I get my points each time I hit a fish. Okay? So now we have a counting variable. We have our variable resetting at the start of our game, but we have one other issue that's sort of bothering me, and that's I don't want this to show up on my title screen. So let's go back to the coding of our title screen, and let's make this disappear on the title screen. So right now we have, I'm clicking on my stage, I'm clicking on the code tab, and it says when the green flag is clicked, change to the title screen, and I want to hide the variable named score. Let's try it. Click. Score is now hidden. Let's start our game, and uh-oh, we don't see our score. So even though we told it to hide, it doesn't magically pop up in our code. We have to go back and tell it to show. So let's go back in the code for the fish. And this was the code we were just working on at the beginning of our game. And we're going to tell it to show after it changes to 0. So whenever the background switches to our game background, we're going to set our score to 0, and we're going to show the variable score, and then we're going to start keeping score. So let's try it. It's hidden on our title screen. We hit start. It has reset our score to 0, and it is visible, and now we can keep score. All right, so that has our variable up and functioning. In the next video, we are going to add our bad guy. We're going to add our jellyfish in so that the game is a little bit more challenging.